Hello and welcome to InspiHER'd, your grown-up girl talk. I am Stacey Fleece and I am here with my co-host Samantha Tredelius, as always. Samantha, big week this week because we had the San Francisco version of the gubernatorial debate this week, which that field is starting to shrink itself as it does.
Mhm.
But we're deep in we're moving deep into election time again, midterms and such. And before anybody hits stop and deletes out of this is not a political show. This is not we're not going to talk political sides and any of that stuff. But what we are going to talk about today is representation because representation is important.
It's huge. And it's so funny and timely because I have just started a series of interviewing the candidates for the Department of Insurance Commissioner in the state of California. Although, you think not so exciting, but it's really interesting to learn about the different candidates as individuals, party aside, just like what are we into, what are we standing for, etc. But then also like our guest today is so great because it's like the people that grow up to be these people that run for office, they got to start somewhere. And what
Totally.
our guest is doing today is helping them get their start. So, welcome, girlfriend. Let's dive in.
Absolutely. First of all, Sarah Jakle, thank you for being here. You are the founder and executive director of DemocraSHE. And I do want to dig in and talk about that. But I want to start with a couple of statistics around representation. Of the seated members of Congress right now, today in 2026, about 28% of them are women. Although we make up 50.4% of the population. Yes, ladies, if you didn't know, we are the majority. Okay. Um, Also, current Congress, 11% of the seated members are women of color, when 20% of the population is of that. So here we are, 2026. We think we've made a lot of advancements, and we have, but we are falling really short on representation that is really reflective of what we have in America today. So, Sarah, thank you for being here. As I said, you are founder and executive director of DemocraSHE, which is a nonpartisan national nonprofit that is fostering the next generation of leaders.
Thank you, Stacey, and thank you, Samantha. I'm so glad you opened with those statistics because they are shocking. I know
I
them
was shocked when I
intimately.
was like looking them up.
Yeah,
It's soul crushing.
I cite them all the time and they shock me every time. I will say it's interesting because I think if we want Congress and all of our elected offices to reflect all of our people, including our women and our radiant spectrum that makes up women, we have to think pipeline. How do we get people in the pipeline? And we have to think what are the barriers that women face in that pipeline that we have to help them overcome? And so DemocraSHE was formed to start in high school, which is the last time boys and girls think they can run for office equally, and incorporate exactly those evidence practices that help women overcome the barriers and say yes to the opportunity and then deal with the pushback that happens when they do.
It's interesting that you talk pipeline because when I think about people running for office, I don't think about a pipeline that you start to grow 20 years prior. Yet, there are experiences and there are things you need to sort of go through in order to be a reasonable candidate. Look, there's a lot of people that throw their names in the hat that are not reasonable. But, you really do have to be thinking way in advance. And it's interesting that on your site, you talk about why more women don't run. And you say on the site that men just assume they'll work into that capacity that they just go, yeah, I can run. And with women, they are more likely to be discouraged to run. Why is that?
So I think part of it is the way women are socialized. Men are socialized to try, fail, try again. And so they develop this very wide resiliency zone of what feels comfortable. And it feels comfortable to self select into opportunities because that's how they're socialized. Women are socialized to be perfect. We are socialized to be small and pretty, and we are socialized to be perfect. So it feels very dangerous to step out of that comfort zone and go for an opportunity. Men and women with the exact same resumes, men are twice as likely to see themselves as a candidate than women. And then to your point, when women do step up as a candidate or running for office, they get completely different pushback. Interestingly, the statistic is that women have to be encouraged to run. Women of color get discouraged. So there's even within women, there's this different framing around candidacy. And women who do step up and run and do nothing other than say, I would like to serve my country, get up to 10 times more harassment and bullying than male candidates. So it's on both sides. It's being able to see yourself as a candidate, and it's also being able to keep going forward when you face very different pushback. And we have to be open eyed about what women go through if we want women to be successful.
Well, I think it's interesting you say that. So Stacey and I went and saw Jacinda, who was the Prime Minister of, I believe, Australia,
New
uh,
Zealand, I think.
New
New
Zealand
Zealand.
during COVID. Whoa, this woman's like ridiculously like amazing. And she was pregnant in office and, was asked questions about her pregnancy or, how could she want to have a baby and like, was kind of like being real and raw with this conversation she was having with this room of 5,000 plus women talking about what it was like to sit in that seat and have these stupid ass questions which were never going to be asked to a man. And she was like, I was more effective at my job than my predecessor was, but because I was a woman and I was pregnant, I that was a whole conversation that I had to have. And she pushed back and I think at one point, got into a little bit of trouble with the press because how dare she, object to these questions. And it was just like, the motherhood angle of it, or the, we're too sensitive of it, or we can't manage all these things. And how are you going to tend to a home? I mean, all those types of questions in 2026 are we still like, why are we still here?
It is heartbreaking, frankly, that we are still here. I mean, and it's interesting because it doesn't even stop when you get elected. I met a Latina mayor from the Midwest who did everything right. She was a social worker who cared about her community. She ran for mayor. She was elected. And almost every time she introduced herself as the mayor, the man she was talking to would say, "No, you're not.
Hmm.
No, you're not."
They just weren't going to accept the results because there's
Just
people above
refused.
her that have done that.
There's just refused. And she finally said, Samantha and Stacey, she would say, "Google it," because she got so mad
Google
and
me, I
watch their
won.
face change. And it was so exhausting to have to relitigate over and over her basic right to be mayor that she didn't want to run again. And that's why it's so important to teach women skills to protect their nervous systems, to protect their inner life, as well as being able to change the way we talk to ourselves from the inner critic that we all know so well to like an inner best friend. So women can not only dare to step up, but thrive even when they're getting ridiculous questions like, who's watching the kids while you're here? Every woman gets this, right? What are you wearing? What is your hair like? You're too loud. You're too aggressive. How do you not let that knock you off your path? How is a young woman right now in high school seeing what women go through, seeing the climate? How do you keep moving forward? And that is including evidence-based practices that research shows keeps you on your track and lets you re-regulate yourself in tough moments so you can go after your authentic ambition.
Well, and I
Well, look,
think,
politics has become a contact sport, right? And
oh,
Yeah.
and it's tough to watch. And I sometimes I think this is why we have shitty candidates because anybody who's a good candidate wouldn't want to put themselves through that shit. And I know that's a lot of what you're trying to overcome. And you talk about the inclusion of brain science in civic leadership training to help overcome those barriers that you were just referring to. So tell us a little bit about the brain science that you incorporate and kind of how you came to because you have a little bit of a personal journey with that and how that came to be part of your program.
I do. So, first of all, I would love to take your listeners on a super quick journey to our brain. So, in the front of our brain is the prefrontal cortex, where we have our rational thoughts that we're aware of, and we often think that's our whole brain. But toward the back of the brain is something called the amygdala. and it is connected to the limbic system, and it is responsible for fight, flight, freeze. It is constantly unconsciously scanning for threat. And this affects women in two ways. One is the amygdala, when it developed back in cave person days, it developed that something unknown would trigger as threat, like a threat. Because if you think about it, if there was something on the path and you didn't know what that was, the cave person who walked up to check it out got bit and died, and we did not get their gene. We got the genes of the cave person who was like, and ran away. So, what that means though is so many of these spaces track as new for women. All the pictures on the wall don't look like us. The pictures in the history book don't look like us. So many spaces of power, like Congress, like boardrooms, don't look like us. And it triggers the amygdala to be cautious, hesitant, and avoidant because it's tracking as unsafe. It is unknown. Men walk into this, it tracks as perfectly safe. It looks exactly like them. The pictures look like them. The walls look like them. And so they are motivated and excited to explore further. They self-select in. Women hesitate. And the other thing the amygdala does is pick up on very real threats. So every time a woman is asked a question, who's taking care of your children while you're giving this speech, the amygdala gets pinged because it's aware that this is a hostile environment. And the more the amygdala gets pinged, the more exhausted we become, overwhelmed and exhausted. So if you think about politics right now in 2026, all of our amygdalas are being pinged all the time, and
I'm
we are
already exhausted
overwhelmed.
from
My
this.
amygdala is like,
Exhausted.
fuck off. Like,
Yes.
no more.
Amygdalas are on fire,
Yeah.
right? So basically, we decided to incorporate amygdala skills into how we train high school girls so a woman's whole brain can become her ally. So instead of just the prefrontal cortex, it's like, you can do it. It's the amygdala who responds to compassion. She responds to tone. She responds to grounding in your body. So if you've ever done yoga and you start to somatically ground, that's an amygdala skill. We teach our girls to ground with Mother Earth and notice the physical contact and come out of the amygdala back to the prefrontal cortex. We savor the good, where you ask yourself to notice things that are beautiful or joyful, to start reorienting the brain to pick up on those just automatically. And all of those things regulate the amygdala, regulate the nervous system, and make your whole brain on your side instead of this unconscious thing that you blame yourself for and say, I'm not a good enough feminist. I'm not a good enough leader. I'm hesitating to raise my hand. She's just doing her job, the amygdala. And she's not as helpful as she thinks she is. She's running off a very old cave person script. So we need to teach her gently to redirect towards something that we authentically want to do.
And these brain hacks of yours are truly battle tested in your own history. Yes?
They are. So I was a social worker. And then in 2014, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease called psoriatic arthritis, which is a brutal autoimmune disease with a lot of pain and fatigue. And a very kind rheumatologist told me that I would never work again.
Thanks. You're like, great.
And I was put on disability. I truly thought, Samantha, that was it for me. But I am stubborn and I'm an academic. And I thought the only thing I can control is how I respond to it. I can't control the pain and I can't control the fatigue. I can't control losing my career, but I can control who I am in this moment and in this process. So I really deep dived into the brain, into the resiliency skills that help people thrive in adversity. I got very into the work, the self-compassion work of Dr. Kristen Neff, acceptance commitment therapy of Dr. Russ Harris. And from all of those, developed my very first inner best friend, who was Barack Obama, and my puppy dog, Max. I developed grounding with Mother Earth. And when the election of 2016 happened, I said, I am not sitting this out. I refuse. So the first time I said I'm getting up, my brain said, no, you're not. And so I grounded with Mother Earth. I checked in with my inner best friend, Barack Obama, who's incredibly encouraging and kind. And I said, just get in the car. Just get in the car. You can always get out. And then it was just drive there. Then it was just register one voter. Start savoring the goods so you're picking up on beautiful, joyful things that help you talk to that voter about the America that you see. And I ended up doing this so many times that I became a national outreach director for a voter registration group called Field Team 6 and the Get Out the Vote director of the California National Organization for Women.
No big deal, girl. I just have the chills. Look at you. Never gonna work again. Woo!
Never going to work again. So when the 2020 election happened, I thought, I have weirdly built my whole life. I also have a master's in public policy and a master's in social work. I've built my whole life to help young women know that their voices belong in our democracy and that running for office is a birthright. And take these very hard won skills that we usually get in our 40s and 50s because we have suffered. And we start going into self compassion or mindfulness or different modalities. What if we just gave those skills to high school girls? The amygdala skills. And so we have had so many girls who take their inner best friend and grounding and savoring and use it to run for office at their school. They use it to launch the first youth reproductive rights conference in Chicago. They have founded nonprofits to encourage youth civic participation. And we had two girls, two sisters who ran for the same school board seat and two times became the youngest elected official in Maryland.
This is incredible. And I say it often, and we had talked a little bit before we started about, walking the walk and talking the talk. So, in our organization, we have a whole crew of young ladies. There's 11 or 12 of them that are on our junior board that are learning leadership skills and they're learning, conflict resolution and dealing with big girl issues and making, impactful moments come to life. And it's amazing how much they absorb that and how hungry for it they are, and they don't even realize it. And so it's like these little skills that we're helping them, fast forward their board experience and their, learning about their amygdala and what it needs to be doing. These small little things we're doing is what's raising the next generation. And I don't understand why more organizations and schools and people around youth aren't being more proactive. Maybe that's our next mission, Fleece.
I
We got
love
Sarah. We just need to partner up with Sarah. She's got the
Plug her in.
brains. We
I
just need to
will
go on her
say
journey.
that you have the young board. And I also agree that you can either tell young women you believe in them or you can show them. And in our organization, our graduates go through the program and come back and lead it. So they run the entire workshop in the breakout rooms and teach the skills. And it is so meaningful to see these young leaders knock it out of the park with being mentors, with being guides, with being things that professionals, you and I know are hard to run an entire 2-hour workshop. These girls do it with style.
Well, and it's
And
like
they
they need to
also
be given
know, yeah,
permission, One of the things that's so fun, and we just had our board retreat, but our girls, I had everybody go around the room and talk about your headline or your highlight or like what you're good at. And, they'd start off with like, I'm Samantha and I think that and I was like, stop right there. You don't think that you are. You need to enter the conversation with I am, or I am. And so sometimes they send me emails and they'll start off with I think, and I will write right back. That's not how, those are no words around me. I believe or I feel, not I think, right? You need to know. But I think these different things that are being implemented at such a ground level are so key. And honestly, like in this world that we live in, ladies, I get such heart palpitations every time I turn on the news or I go outside and I just have interactions with people about, things going on. And everything's so mean and chaotic and it doesn't need to be. And we get to make the decision on what the next group looks like. And I don't think we realize that as adults.
I absolutely think if we want the tone of our country to change, it's not even just starting with youth. It's actually recognizing that the fight, flight, freeze part of our brain has been engaged. And you can't rationally talk your way out of her. She has completely different languages, and that is the grounding, and that's the compassion, and that's the tone, and that's the savoring. And so my passion is making sure, starting with DemocraSHE, but making sure every organization that works with youth ultimately incorporates these same amygdala tools so that every young person from a young age learns in a difficult discussion when I feel myself flooding, how can I ground? How can I stay physically present in my body? One of the things we teach in DemocraSHE is shifting the word but to the word and. So
Mm.
if I'm saying, that's really interesting, Samantha, but I wonder if you thought about the minute you hear but, you know we're in an argument. That's really interesting, Samantha. And I wonder if you've thought about you don't lose any of your idea, but you lose the trigger word that we are debating. And we actually can hear each other, which we desperately need, while standing firm in our values.
Hmm.
The it's fantastic that you are getting to them in high school because, like you noted at the top of the interview, it's the last time that boys and girls sort of have the same expectation that they can do X, Y, and Z. They can run and what have you. So you teach them the skills. What kind of effort is DemocraSHE doing to stay with these gals as they continue to go down their journey and down their path? Because, like I said, it could be 20 years, 25 years before we don't have representation like Mitch McConnell. I don't know who the guy that's glitching is representative of. I don't who sees themselves in that. I don't know. But at some point we got to move to something that's more representative of, as I said, who we really are as a country.
I love that question because I think it's so important to stay with the girls. We talk to girls in DemocraSHE about how we are a sisterhood where women lift women for life. We have each other's back for life. So many of our alumni come back and run alumni events, which is everything from, understanding the college process, because we're 70% first gen Americans, to careers like law and medicine and politics and all the different things how to get there, how to apply to schools. We also have speakers come in. We have a lot of the girls share what they're up to. And just this year, we are launching advanced DemocraSHE. So many of our alumni have asked to keep going with the skills that we're launching, meeting your inner champion, not just your inner best friend, and getting involved in civics and midterms. This year, how can you get involved? And a narrative program of writing and writing college essays together, and then bringing your big idea to your sisters and getting advice and building on it and keeping each other accountable. And we have a group me community where girls ask for advice all the time. Someone will drop, hey, I have a group interview, any advice? And four of her sisters will chime in with their best practices for group interviews and check in on her. And it truly is something where women lift women. And I love seeing that start at a young age.
So the students that you're assisting is nationwide, correct?
Yes,
And your program is primarily online.
yes.
So for everyone that's listening that's got a young lady in their life or somebody that you think could really benefit from this is an attainable situation all over the country. The program itself, I would assume, really does look good on a resume for college. It's probably got a lot of other perks to it too, just not only internally. The flagship program, from what I'm seeing online here, is a 10-week program. Is that correct?
And it is correct.
And
And we also pay our students.
that's what I was going to say. So there's some incentive there for these young ladies. They're actually going to get paid per hour to attend. So wow. I mean, I feel like that's like a thing to kind of get them locked in, get the fish on, but what they're getting on the other side of it's so much more than, the stipend per hour.
Well, and it
I
certainly
have,
opens it up to
yeah.
everybody, regardless of
Yeah.
socioeconomic or economic status, that we're not gonna make a tuition be the barrier in getting this skill set.
Precisely. And I think if we truly want America to reflect all of her people, we have to lower barriers to entry to early political pipelines. And many girls can't afford unpaid internships. So I think paying the stipend, both to your point, Stacey, opens it up no matter your economic background. And I think every young woman deserves to know that her time has value. I
Yes.
think
Thank
we
you.
see women volunteer, and I love that for us. And I love it to be a choice where we also know our worth. We see women under negotiate for salaries because men ask for more. I think getting to women in high school and saying, your time is worth money. We would pay to invest in you because that's how valuable you are is a really critical message for women. Also, when they're doing fundraising for campaigns and they're asking for money for their own campaign, I have worth and value. I am worth investing in.
Well,
Well,
and
you know
these
what?
skills are transferable to
Yes.
really any path in life. Whether or not they're taking a political leadership role, which is not solely what you guys are about. This is really about being able to step into leadership confidently in any aspect of life. Like honestly, I need this.
Can we sign up?
Can I join the 10-week class?
It really is because I had so many women when I was working in politics in 2020. And I was starting to talk about these skills, the amygdala skills, because I was seeing so much pushback on women and it drove me crazy. And women kept saying, I wish I knew this in high school. I wish I knew this in high school. If I had an inner best friend, what could my career have been? And I thought, why not do it in high school? And then I do sometimes train adult women in this as well, because women are my passion. So definitely, if any of your listeners are interested in this, reach out to me on LinkedIn and let's chat because it's so easy to do for groups of women as well. And I want every woman to make her whole brain her ally.
Well, and I think it's so interesting you mentioned this word worth. So I have a couple girlfriends in town here that are, involved in local politics, and you know, in our city they pay, I believe, the mayor $400 per month. And she was telling me, she's like, this is a 50 to $60 an hour work week on the average. Like I'm working a lot doing this. And yes, it's cool to have the title, but like, why are we not getting compensated for our time in the right way? And so they went to council and got a vote through, and they increased their pay 200% from $400. So, wow, guys, wow. And people up on the like Facebook next door were, this is an atrocity. People were just, oh. And it's like, guys, you want leaders and you want people to speak on your behalf and do these wonderful things, but yet they don't deserve to be compensated. And then there was some comment about her being a woman, and I was like, listen, Bruce, okay? I see you. I know where you're at, bud. But like, when did that become acceptable? I mean, if you're gonna get into it, you should be getting into it and be compensated because it is your job, right?
I agree.
I mean,
You
hello.
you you pay somebody $400 a month, that's exactly what you're going to get. Somebody who accepts $400 a month.
Yeah.
So you want quality people, it's not the way to get it long term. I can't put it any more simply.
Business 101, guys.
Yeah.
But I do feel that, this next generation of students and kids and people going out into the workforce, they're a different animal. And they're more kind of they're more knowledgeable about politics than they've ever been and things. Because like when I was growing up, like we didn't have social media and all these things. And so it's like this perfect sweet spot where I think they're more, they're open, they're like receptors are open to it where years ago they weren't. I mean, are you finding that when you're out there finding these young individuals?
I absolutely think so. I think young people are receptive to understanding that their time has value. I think they really are open to it. Thinking even going into social work or public service or teachers are typically underpaid jobs. I think they're starting to advocate for that matching what the job matching the salary.
Yeah, I mean that feels about as simple as it gets, right?
Yeah.
DemocraSHE.org is where you can find a lot more information about this wonderful organization we are talking about. It is a nonprofit, so I am assuming that we're always accepting donations to continue the mission and the vision. Sarah, you are a woman that I'm so glad reached out to us. Your work is so inspiring, and we hope that everybody this year, this month, this year gets out, or this, I can't even talk 'cause I'm so excited. This year, this month, and this day is what I'm trying to say, is inspiring.